Chapter 220 to 222. While Raki was out in the Happo Navy trying to learn Hashokan, and while Ace was in Impel Down and the 5 elders were deciding what to do with him, Amon was in Judge's lab located on a branch of Giant Jack. He was sitting in a chair with a bunch of bounty posters in his hand. Big Mom was a threat, a big one at that. Killing her was bound to cause the people involved bounties to spike up. That's exactly what happened with his crew. Amon wasn't present to witness it because of his time in Alabasta, but now that he was back in Skypea, he was getting up to date with his crew's new bounty. The Sin of Wrath, Raki, bounty 1.9 billion. The Sin of Pride, Wiper, bounty 1.4 billion. The Sin of Gluttony, Uruj, bounty 990 million. The Sin of Lust, Boa Hancock, bounty 950 million. The Sin of Sloth, Yona, bounty 900 million. The Sin of Greed, Tsumi, bounty 800 million. Motor Gang Leader, Short Motor, bounty 600 million. Soul King, Brook, bounty 400 million. All the Sin's previous titles, like Heavenly Princess, were changed and dumped, since many of the pirates around the world were confused about their identity at one point or another, so the Marines had to do this. Now they were simply referred to as the Sins, just like the other Emperor's commanders' titles. At last, Amon moved his gaze at the last poster, his poster, which previously had the bounty of 2 billion, but now, Emperor of the Sky, Amon bounty, 4,710,000. Exactly 1 million lesser than Kaido, eh? Kinda funny. Amon snickered. What was this? Were they trying to prove that Kaido was still above him, even after he killed Big Mom? Funny. From Hyena, he learned the reason as to why his bounty only increased 400 million after killing and fucking Emperor of the Sea. In the case of a normal person, this would have thrown their bounties directly on the 2 billion or even 3 billion categories, but this was not a normal person. The unwritten rule is, the more bounty a person has, the less it'd increase over time, so that there stays a balance between things. If not, Whitebeard would have long surpassed Roger since it's been 20 years following his death. Other than that, there was a personal reason initiated by the Celestials. Apparently, giving Amon a bounty above Kaido would cause him to grow more arrogant, thus causing him to do his piracy job to extreme lengths. Yes, before they were fighting to increase his bounty in the hope that some emperor would be pissed and attack him, but after this recent incident, they were against it. They feared, if the other emperors attacked Amon, and if somehow they lost and got killed, there would be no one between Amon and the world government. Then who would save them from him? After a talk with Imu, 5 elders knew that they didn't possess enough power to hold Amon off. Well, other than the great Imu Sama, who unfortunately was locked under the barrier fruits barrier. Amon, who wasn't 100% aware of this, chuckled softly. Oh, well, the War of the Best is there for a reason. That's my biggest opportunity until now, in my 22 years of life. After countless emotions and glee of opportunity flashed by his eyes, a sigh left his lips, as just then a huge figure walked in. "Milord." It was Vinsmoke Judge. "He's ready." "Oh?" Amon nodded his head and put the posters down. Getting up from the chair, he then walked to Judge. "Lead the way, then." For a power play, he walked a few steps in front of Judge, who directed him towards a cell hidden under the chamber. Reaching the chamber, Judge walked forward and opened the door with a key. Amon peeked inside with an inquisitive look on his face. Inside, a black-haired man was chained against the wall with a frown on his face. "It's you, yeah?" It was one of the supernovas, Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. "Is it finally time for you to tell me why I am here?" he asked, while eyeing Judge, as his gaze then drifted to Amon. "Or would he tell me?" "Oh, hi. I believe you know me already?" Amon gave him a short smirk. "Hope my men treated you well these days." Law chucked at this. "Ha! treating me well? That they did, yeah? But with my crew as a hostage, it doesn't really matter, does it now? Y'all are just trying to use me, for reasons I am still not aware of. Amon crouched down, chuckling. Oh, you don't need to be aware of it to be clear. You are a doctor, but you're only at your level for your fruit. If not for the fact that a new person with op fruit would need to learn things from the get-go, you'd have been killed by now. I do have better doctors on me, after all. Law clicked his tongue. Another one after my fruit. Amon shrugged at this. If you don't have the power to protect something so precious, then avoiding situations like this is impossible, though giving you this type of advice is meaningless now. It's been a week since Law was found by Amon's network. Marines usually get the news of a pirate's location very late, and when the news does reach them, another problem arises. By the time a Marine reaches the island that a pirate is supposed to be, the said pirate usually already leaves for the next island. So catching a pirate based on news is almost improbable. However, that is not a problem with Amon, not at all. With his incredible speed, capturing Law was a piece of cake after wingless Valkyries notified him of Law's current position. Unfortunately, Amon doesn't have his eyes in other blues, so it was hard to find Law a few years ago unless he sent a few troops after him specially, which he didn't, since there was no immediate need for Law, and instead waited for him to reach the Grand Line. So, what's going to happen to me now? Law was forced to shut his mouth as Amon grabbed his jaw with his hand. Shh, quiet now. I don't enjoy conversation with dead people. Law's eyes widened. Dead! His fear came true. He didn't know what to do as Amon grabbed his skull with his hand just as extreme pain invaded his brain. He felt his nervous system overloading and some of his nerves bursting forward. He desperately tried to activate his fruit in the hope to reverse operate his brain, but unfortunately, he was chained with sea stone shackles. Grrg! Law struggled. Foam started to leak from the corner of his lips as his heart started to pump faster. At last, when reality sank in him, just as he realized that something worse than death was happening to him, he tried to kill himself. He tried to bite his tongue, but just then, his brain shut off and rebooted itself. All this happened in less than a second. Law's body slouched down as he started ahead with blank eyes. Amon drew his hand back from his head and hissed, "Not really a fan of brainwashing anymore. Maybe I am growing soft." Behind him, Judge stood with an indifferent look on his face. He didn't seem affected at all. Anyway, Amon stood up while wiping his hand with a handkerchief and threw it away. "Bring him to the main chamber. I am really excited about all this." Judge nodded. Yamato sat on the floor while eating a burger slowly. Her eyes drifted all around the high-tech medic room with barely any interest present in them. You guys really have the most developed technology, huh?" She talked in between eating as Karna nodded. "But of course, technology is our main department of work." He laughed softly. "There was once a time when we didn't even have TV, from what I heard from Mom." "Whoa, really? What's a TV, though?" Yamato gulped the last bite of the burger. Karna looked at her with narrowed eyes and shrugged. "Woman, why are you here in the first place?" "I want to see Amon's transformation." Karna frowned while Yamato wiped her lips. "Did he permit you?" "He said it's fine." Yamato's eyelids drooped, showing her sleepy state. "I just want to watch him become an Oni. We're quite rare after all." Yamato was asking constant questions when she was being experimented on, which Amon allowed Karna and Judge to answer to keep her complying. "Bleh." Karna scoffed and turned to the monitor, where a section face was displaying. This was clearly Seraph, the supercomputer AI who was connected to all the computers in Shandora, along with this lab. He clenched his small fist. He wouldn't have been able to succeed in decoding Yamato's DNA and make it implantable in others if not for the AI. he was still an incompetent being. Vegapunk was many times greater than him. That's enough. Just then, Amon, who talked, walked inside with Judge and Law. Amon walked to Karna and patted his head. You did fine. Don't forget you're but a child who hasn't even turned 10. I am sure you'd be able to do great things once you reach your 20s. Karna gave Amon a surprised look that soon turned into a smile as he hugged Amon's legs. I believe in you. Well, you should. Amon shrugged. He made Isa eat medicines when Karna was in her wombs. They weren't harmful, not at all. Instead, they were similar to the medications that help the development of a baby from Earth. Just that, the ones made by Amon lacked a bit of testing since he was far from a doctor back then. So Karna by no means was normal. He can be considered a genetically enhanced human too, but the enhancement only happened in his brain. So it might not be very far-fetched to say that he has the capability of becoming one of the best scientists in the world. The experiment this time got a lot of help from Karna, but it was mostly Judge. First, using germline factor manipulating techs, they tried to implement Or's DNA directly onto humans, who died instantly as the DNA started to merge with theirs because instead of merging, Or's DNA started to devour their own. Next, they researched Caesar's experiment on the kids. After that, to make the humans' DNA adaptive, they started to feed them special medications made by none other than Kureha, the best doctor in the world. The result was slow this time, but after trying to change their DNA according to Or's, they indeed started to change, albeit slowly, day by day. However, just like the drawback in Caesar experiment, since the subjects were adults, they all died before the transformation could have been completed 100%. After that, luckily Judge got his hands on some failed onus, the numbers from Kaido's army. They had Or's like strength, but they lost their mind in the process. That wouldn't have done, so Judge demanded strong people who would be able to bear the stress of the experiment without breaking. That's where the Charlotte children came. Using them, Judge was able to make more promising progress. Things weren't that good at first, but they didn't just die after a single experiment, and the effects still stayed, so the progress was calculable and things were going smoothly. That was until they learned that Or's race is called Oni, based on the poneglyph and some ancient texts that Robin found. They figured out using Moria's zombified body, by Yona, that he was an Oni too, and Kaido was most likely one too. This made sense with the previous rivalry of Kaido and Moria as well. The great change began when they got their hands on Yamato, a true, alive Oni. And when they got Yamato to freely experiment on, the progress of the experiment skyrocketed, and in a matter of weeks, they were able to make an elixir, the Great Demon Blood. After drinking this elixir, the test subject's DNA was so flexible that it was almost possible for them to eat another devil fruit. Almost. And now, Amon was there, with that same elixir in front of him. Here, my lord. Judge respectfully handed Amon the elixir that he accepted with a calm face. Taking a deep breath, he opened the cap of the bottle and devoured the contents in one go. At that moment, he almost fell on his knees as his leg bones felt like noodles, but Judge grabbed him and helped him stay standing. Careful, as I explained in the way since the elixir made your lineage flexible, they are now quite timid, so you'd not be able to exert your strength much. Judge explained as Amon nodded. It's been a while since I felt this weak. He simply chuckled while his body shook like an old man. Anyway, guide me to the incubator. Judge nodded while he helped Amon walk to the glass incubator in the middle of the room. The glass of the incubator is very durable, but if a strong person really wanted it, they'd be able to break, thus killing Amon easily. It was honestly a little worrying since there wasn't anyone there other than Yamato, who he knew can be trusted based on her surface thoughts and emotions. That's why Law was here. If anything happened, he can just teleport away with Amon, and in the worst-case scenario, if the experiment starts to fail, he can use his Op No Me to reverse operate on Amon any moment and save his life. Law was a lifeline. As Amon stepped inside the incubator and as many metallic tentacles surrounded him, stripping him naked while raising him in the air, dozens of metallic pipes made a hole in his spinal cord and connected with his whole body. Operation starting. Please be prepared for hell, Master. With Seraph's voice vanishing slowly into thin air, Amon felt a suck in his soul. Ha 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 ha! Reiki couldn't help but laugh out loud as she saw ripples leaving her hands. Her armament-covered fist hit Don Chinjiao on his head, on his flat skull, creating ripples in the space upon contact. Don Chinjiao, the greatest master of Hashokan, couldn't help but feel proud of his disciple. Ha! Chinjiao gasped, feeling the great strength clashing with his head. To think such talent existed! This little girl came to him around 2 months ago to learn Hashokan. He didn't want to, but he had to teach her his family technique as it was one of the conditions of the Hapo Navy's and Einherjar's alliance. So when he started teaching her things, she got it on the first try. How crazy was that? She did say she knew similar techniques that used shockwave as a base, a thing called the Rokugan or something, but it was nonetheless an impressive feat. And if it wasn't impressive enough, she reached an an unbelievable level of mastery in less than 2 months. No, it wasn't as good as his prime self, but it was at the same level as his current self. That alone speaks a lot. Chinjiao didn't know, but this wasn't talent. It was cheating. If talented people like Luffy were to be here, he'd have learned it in maybe a week. Luffy did learn Ryu in that time frame in canon, after all. However, Rocky didn't use her latest. She simply cheated her way to the top. Rocky wouldn't have normally been able to reach this far so early, if not for the fact that she was already at a good level with Rokugan, and had her which let her imitate techniques to a degree. Since her teacher was old Qianzhou, she imitated his current technique. If she was lucky enough to get teaching from Prime Qianzhou, she could have reached this prime self. Just as Chinjiao finished his internal monologue, he felt Rocky's fist hitting his head again. This time he felt a sharp pain in his head, almost as if something that had been slumbering for a long time arose. Huh? Rocky stopped punching and exclaimed, "Hey, old man! Your head is weird. It's pointy all of a sudden." Chinjiao forgot about the spar and ran to find a mirror, and to his to his amazement, he found a lost treasure. That is his head. Just things in the Hapo Navy's HQ got weird, so Rocky quickly took leave after confirming that Chinjiao wouldn't be able to teach her anything better anymore. Now, this was a journey of her own. She laughed softly and raised her palm to her face. Upon concentrating the strength in her body, not her haki, ripples came out of her palms and vibrations hit her face. This was so awesome, but not as awesome as Conqueror's coating. Ah! She groaned and shook her head. That might be true now, but if she could learn how to mix with this, she'd be clearly able to match Conqueror's coating. This excited her a lot, so she couldn't stop the giggle from leaving her lips. Heh, I wonder if brother knows Hashokan. If he doesn't, I can flex at him. As she giggled again, the Heaven's Gate entered her sight from a distance. She was in her hybrid form, except for her head, so 6 wings had sprouted up in her back as she flapped them and went flying towards the giant jack. The first thing she did was looking for Amon, but she soon remembered that he had gone to do the surgery from his chat with Robin using her smart dial, so she instead made a detour to the branch of Giant Jack where Vinsmoke Judge's laboratory is located. "Hey, where are you, bro?" She ran inside just as she stilled abruptly, coming face to face with a huge incubator at the size of at least 3 normal humans. "Whoa! Who is inside that?" she asked, looking at the human figure floating inside that with his eyes closed. "Wait, is that brother?" Her eyes widened just as she heard an shh coming from behind her. She turned to find Yamato standing there eating an apple. "Don't cause a fuss." He almost died twice. The incubator he was inside at first had burst out because of the sudden increase in his body size. If not for this guy, she pointed at a corner where Law was sitting, the incubator would have broken and your brother would have died. Using Law was able to teleport Amon to a new incubator that was prepared in an emergency. Reiki's eyes widened. She at first wanted to slap the bitch for interrupting her, but the words that left the Oni's mouth concerned her. It's fine, though. Munch. She pointed at the large monitor on the wall. That thing is a progress bar or something, that kid said. It looks almost full. Reiki turned her head at the monitor where the completion bar was 99%. This caused her to heave a sigh. Where is Judge? She turned to the girl and asked. He's not. Oh, wait, he's here. Just as Yamato finished her words, Vinsmoke Judge walked inside the room and greeted Rocky. Hello, young miss, welcome back. Cut the crap. Tell me, is brother going to be okay? Judge nodded. Of course. I can see your concern, as I have heard about his previous surgeries, but not to worry, he's completely fine now. This medicine has been tested on others a lot of times before. It shouldn't have any drawbacks. Huh. Suddenly, the small figure of Karna walked in. That statement isn't really accurate. He's already experiencing a change in size. That didn't happen in others. If I have done even a tiny bit of contribution in this research, it was the changes I made in Oni blood that was supposed to make sure that the surgery wouldn't change the appearance of the test subject. But it's already looking bad, so we can't be sure. The 99% progress doesn't mean anything good, as the real problems occur just at this percent most of the time. At this, Judge went silent. He sighed. I guess it can't be helped. We did do tests on others, but since the Oni blood used here is a mixture of Yamato, Moria, Or's, and even Big Mom's blood, the problem arose. Big Mom wasn't supposed to be included, but after my lord asked, and after the mixture came out a success, I didn't think adding that blood would be a bad thing. Sadly, the only strong test subjects who we had on us that could survive the surgery are Big Mom's own children who already share her lineage, aka DNA, so testing it on them didn't show any effect, obviously. Rocky frowned and turned to Amon's large body inside the incubator. Was that really necessary? There were strong people in the God's army too, or maybe not. From what she learned, other than exceptionally physically strong people of Big Mom's army, like Oven, and even Charlotte Smoothie, who was brought to experiment on too at some point, everyone else died. And as far as she was aware, there weren't many physically strong people in Amon's army. Most were strong because of their technique, not their strong genes. There was only Urouge and herself. Amon probably didn't want to use Urouge since losing a Sin as strong as him might have caused him a lot, and Rocky was just out of question. If not for a total emergency, he'd never test on her again. She knew that. It seems he didn't deem this as an emergency, for whatever reason. Perhaps he was confident at controlling any backlash that might come at his body. And "ah" left Rocky's lips. "Saime Kikan." Before she could smile, she froze again. If Simai Kikon was his master plan, it has already failed since it couldn't stop his body from getting larger. Then is he out of all his cards? It's fine, big sis, Karna muttered. There isn't much to worry about with that law guy over there. Even if the operation fails, Brother Amon wouldn't die for sure. He may go to coma, but we can work around that somehow. Crack. Suddenly, the incubator cracked. What's happening, Judge? Reiki yelled as the computer showing the progress bar suddenly went red, and an emergency bell started to ring heavily. The test subject is getting overwhelmed. The test subject is getting overwhelmed. The test subject is getting overwhelmed. Ah! A loud and deep cry came from within the incubator. It was a painful cry. The great pain the man inside the incubator was feeling was clear from this cry alone. The whole room went red from the alarm break, causing panic amongst the people below to spark up. Reiki started to look around as millions of ideas started to pop up in her head. What should she do? Calm down, everyone. I will do something. What are you gonna do? Call that guy over there, Karna retorted Judge and pointed at Law. That's a good idea. Yamato ran to Law and brought him back. You do something. Yes. Law nodded at Judge's words as he tried to open A, but just then, just before he could do so, lightning sparked on his forehead as he slopped down on the floor. What's happening? The red beeping sound caused Karna to almost lose it as he cried out, but just then, Rocky held her breath. Wait. I think I know what happened. She recalled her conversation with Amon once about the greatest devil fruits in the world. The op was one of them, so she knew what uses it had. That was a lightning spark. I recall inside a room, nobody can experience pain, nor can they be hurt, and only the op user can do surgery. Nobody else can. From the lighting spark, we can assume that Brother did it consciously so that Law doesn't open a room and ruin the operation, meaning the pain he's experiencing and everything that is happening right now is for his own good, I think. Everyone stopped talking as they took her words into their minds. They slowly calmed their breathing and looked at the incubator with worried eyes. You think he's going to be okay? Yamato asked, looking at Rocky, whose golden eyes were shining at the incubator. A small smile appeared on the latter girl's face. Yeah, he's strong. Crack! The incubator burst out before she could finish her line. Pieces of glass jumped towards all of them as Judge covered himself with the veil on his back, as Yamato transformed to her hybrid form and crouched down, and as Rocky grabbed Karna and protected him with her back, also in her hybrid form. A green gas soon enveloped the whole hall. Just after the gas mostly subsided, Rocky stood up, but she didn't have to look for Amon, as the huge figure of a 30-feet man came into her view immediately. She started at the figure with Karna in her arms with wide eyes. He was naked, but because of the bit of fog that was still present, his face and the thing between his legs was hidden. She could see his large hips big enough to crush a mountain, his wide arms large enough to grab the clouds, and his chest that was wide enough to cover the entire night sky. There was no general change in his skin tone. He didn't become yellow-skinned or anything, so Rocky guessed that was fine. Of course, she didn't mind any changes as long as he was still Amon in the mind. So she jumped up and flew towards his face with her wings, leaving Karna behind. Getting close to his face that had a stern and stone-like look, she froze briefly. There were 2 red horns in his head, just like Yamato. His eyes were sharp, very so. His jaw was heavy and his nose was high. He had his old shoulder-length hair, too, but it was wet because of the liquid inside the incubator. His facial appearance also looked the same as before, except for the horns and the bit of dead look within his eyes. Brother? He didn't answer at first, but he did open his mouth after a few seconds. You are... His voice was deep, but that didn't matter. What mattered was his question. You are? What the hell was this bastard saying? Was he trying to make fun out of her? Brother, it's me, Rocky. Rocky? He tilted his huge head. Rocky who? I am sorry. I don't think I know you. Are you sure you're not mistaking me for someone else? Also, where is this place? Reiki's eyes widened as her lips quivered. This bastard. Why did he choose to add Big Mom's blood? That bitch was crazy. Did that make him go crazy too? She clenched her jaws for the last time. Are you... Amon? Amon who? His deep voice finally caused something to break within her. Amon didn't have a deep voice. He would also never forget her. This guy wasn't Amon. He couldn't be Amon. Amon wouldn't lose his mind after a mere surgery. She didn't believe so. In anger, she curled her fist and punched him in the face, but unlike how she expected her punch to hit his large face, he simply vanished. There was no bzzzt. There was nothing. He just vanished. She moved her eyes around, but she couldn't find anyone. Just as she was about to look behind her, she felt a hand on her shoulder. My, is that how you treat patients? She abruptly looked back towards the source of the voice, just where a human-sized Amon was standing while wearing a white shirt and black pants. His hair was short, not reaching his shoulders anymore, and he had an everlasting grin on his face. That same grin caused something to snap in Rocky's head. Also, you shouldn't punch your own brother. I was just kidding. Die! A beam of light left her mouth, blinding the whole hall. Amongst the light, only the sound of a man laughing and a girl yelling "die" could be heard. By manipulating the electricity present in my body, I manipulated my body's adaptability system like how Saime Kiken does to properly absorb the Oni blood. That's why I was still alive. And that's why I would probably be the only subject to ever come out of this exact elixir. That's why I shot Law unconscious, since his room would have caused things to turn bad. I succeeded. Bioelectricity manipulation isn't something I had before. I gained this mid-surgery. My Goro Goro no Mi has finally awakened. I was able to surpass the urge to laugh out loud, but I wasn't able to suppress the soft grin from forming on my face. If my guess about my new powers is correct, then it's not too far-fetched to say I am a real god. Though, I looked at the girl in my arms as my grin turned to a smile. They looked in front of them where Rocky had her head buried on Amon's chest, while the latter had a rare, genuine smile on his face. They assumed the smile came from Rocky, and they weren't entirely wrong. The two siblings didn't say anything and stayed like that, as Yamato finally broke the ice of silence. Are you feeling okay? You're still Amon, right? She asked slowly, worry present in her voice. Amon looked at her and smiled. He liked good girls like her. Easy to manage. He stopped thinking anything like that for now and shook his head. This wasn't time for that. She then looked at his human-sized body hugged by Rocky. And also, what's up with your body? It was huge just a minute ago. Amon blinked at her question. I am Amon. Not to worry about that. And about my body, well, basically, I can control the size of my body at will. It is one of the powers of my fruit. Like this. Under Rocky's hug, Amon's body slowly became small and took the form of a 12-year-old child. Rocky raised her face to look at him for a second before hugging him again. This time, Amon's face was buried on her chest instead. Peeking from her shoulder, Amon then continued, Previously, my skin turned bluish-white, but now, well, it seems my fruit. So I can control the color of my lightning at will. That's how I am maintaining this natural human skin color. Nobody in the room cared about the awakening of his fruit, since nobody understood just how much it changed things. Oh, okay, if you're feeling good then. Yamato nodded. Nice horns, by the way. Amon smiled cheekily at this. He could feel two small horns on his head, indeed, and they were quite sensitive right now. He then eyed the woman, no, the little girl hugging him. Rocky. At the child Amon's call, the little girl simply hugged him tighter. I guess it's my fault. I shouldn't have joked like that. But, can you free me? I want to test my new powers. He couldn't finish his words, as his childlike head was simply pushed inside two soft marshmallows. Rocky apparently liked Shota Amon, so he had to quickly put her to sleep before she could get any weird ideas. Next, he was inside his personal training hall with a huge house-sized dumbbell in his right hand. He raised it to the air and lowered it, and continued the motion. It was easy, very easy. Amon was strong, very much so, but he was also aware that he was nowhere close to so casually lift this dumbbell, at least not before. It meant one thing: this worked. The Oni blood, the second elixir, was made to strengthen Amon's body like an Oni, like Oars and Kaido. It not only worked, but because of some other unforeseen situation, his true form was now a small giant. The important part of all this was, He could feel the enhanced defense that Big Mom once had. It wasn't at her level, of course, but he could feel that if trained right, he would be able to even surpass her because of all the other DNA in his body. In this world, lineage was the most important after the mythical inheritance of wills. Amon has the first one now, and probably the second one too, since he is the descendant of Kalgara. So he was ready to go and become the king of the world. Actually, Big Mom's defense came from the skin-hardening technique she used, kind of like, but a stronger variant. But this wasn't a learnable skill. This was like those abilities that judges' children have, basically a gene ability. Amon muttered to himself as he closed his eyes. And no wonder, he could feel his skin clenching themselves and getting hard, rock hard. Though I can't keep it passively yet. But at least I can move around with this skill turned on. And it was almost like learning Tekai all over again. Either way, this is everything he got from the physical enhancement. STR and Def, a lot of it. He already had AGI before, so no need to worry about that. He was the master of one before, but now he was the jack of all trades and master of all too. He could safely say he was now unkillable, no matter who the opponent was. That's not all, though. Muttering such, he threw the dumbbell away, which created a crater where he fell. He first looked at a corner of the room where a girl with horns on her head was eating fruits. "Yo, Miss Yamato." The girl, Yamato, turned to him and dashed here. "Yes? Help me test something." At her nod, he explained what he wanted her to do. Strike him with her strongest attack, without using Ryu or Conqueror's coating, of course. He was trying to test one of his defense techniques, but CC would make it useless. Okay. Yamato didn't question much. She also wanted to see how far this man was from her current self. So she raised her club over her shoulder and swung at him at full force, using her basic armament haki to its highest degree. Zhm. Her club couldn't reach Amon. No, far from that. It stopped mid-air, clashing with the transparent barrier that came out of Amon's raised palm. "I call this..." He smiled softly and motioned at her, asking her to continue. His fruit awakened. The Goro Goro no Mi, or the Rumble Rumble fruit, whatever you call it, is easily the strongest Logia. That's why Amon had been so desperately trying to awaken it, because he knew, with just the awakening of this alone, he'd be able to surpass the monsters of this world. Normally, DF awakening happens when a user reaches the top of the general concept of a particular fruit, and just when the user tries to desperately reach beyond the general concept, the fruit awakens. The general concept of lighting was using it to shock and burn people, enhance speed, teleport, or just simply blast a bolt of lightning, that's all. Amon has done such things already. In fact, he's been using some of the advanced techniques too, like brainwashing by manipulating the electrical signals in the nervous system. Being a person from the 21st century, he had already met the criteria to awaken his fruit. He had realized this a long time ago. If so, what was the thing stopping his awakening? He found the answer to this question too. It's just that devil fruits have a chunk of power stored within them. Nobody can assess it from the get-go, and can only access it after the fruit awakens so that their bodies can be prepared for great power. So, if Goro Goro's awakening happened before the surgery, meaning before his body was strong enough to contain the surging power within his body, he'd have been overloaded with such power, and he'd simply blown up. Amon didn't know, but after awakening, the fruit can be evolved further. Until now, the fruit just lent its previously stored power. But after this, it'd allow new powers that the user, Amon, would obtain, such as this one, force field creation. By manipulating the electromagnetic field in the air, Amon created a force field strong enough to withstand Yamato's strongest attack, not only once, but 900 times. Huff! 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 Yamato, who used all her strength to try and break the transparent barrier in front of her, panted hard. "Just what's up with this?" she yelled, not being able to contain it any longer. "Just one of my new powers. Precisely. My second power after the awakening. It can block any attack as long as it has enough energy backing it up. Amon didn't say that he had basically limitless energy. Yamato wanted to ask what the first power was, but from the smile on Amon's face, it didn't seem like he'd answer it. Quaha. Amon laughed, knowing what she was thinking. People's thoughts were also clearer to him. It was, of course, but she doesn't need to know that. Quaha-ha. Amon suddenly covered his face with his hand as another laughter left him. This time, the laughter was a bit weird. Although Yamato couldn't tell, Amon was feeling a little crazy. Not bad crazy, but good crazy. Maybe Big Mom's blood did affect him just like Rocky said. It didn't matter, though. He was sure this effect would soothe by time, but for now he was feeling great, feeling all-powerful as happy hormones dominated his brain. Seeing Amon starting to laugh suddenly, Yamato stilled. Amon couldn't see, but from the outside perspective, he was looking mesmerizing. Image here. It was almost as if reality was playing itself. A god who's also a devil? Wait, wasn't he an angel too? Yamato thinned her lips. This man looked bewitching. She didn't know why he gave off a dangerous yet calming aura at the same time. Was he always like that? Just then, Amon stopped laughing. "Can you hear me, miss?" And suddenly, a voice rang inside Yamato's head, causing her to jump up and look around. "Ha! It's me! Look in front!" Yamato slowly turned her head forward, only to find Amon smiling with his arm raised in the air, almost as if he's calling for a certain hammer of lightning. What was that? Telepathy? Surprising Yamato, the window of the training hall shattered into bits as a black sword with shining black blade came flying into Amon's hand. "Master! I was scared all of a sudden at what was pulling me!" A voice left the sword, causing Yamato to question her existence. "Wait, why can a sword talk?" "That's for later." Amon raised his hand towards her. "How about a duel?" He really needed a punching bag to calm his crazy, or he might go crazy.